Most people hear Depression-era food and picture something gray and sad, some thin soup in a tin cup, a bread line, a family splitting a single potato five ways and calling it dinner. And sure, some of it was bleak. But here's the thing most people get wrong about the food that came out of the Great Depression and the two world wars. It wasn't just survival food. A lot of it was brilliant food, resourceful, nutrient dense, almost suspiciously well designed food that we quietly abandoned the moment grocery store shelves filled back up. Here's a number that'll stop you for a second. During World War II, the British government hired a biochemist named Jack Drummond to redesign the national diet under rationing. Drummond's wartime ration delivered roughly 3,000 calories a day using mostly simple, whole ingredients. And the result? Infant mortality dropped. Average lifespan went up. The British population was, by multiple measurable health outcomes, healthier during rationing than they were before or after the war. Not because they were eating more, because they were eating smarter. And the reason you've never heard most of this is honestly kind of predictable. A $2 meal made from foraged greens and leftover bones doesn't generate shareholder value. A $9 cup of bone broth at a wellness boutique does. The food industry didn't suppress this knowledge. It just found ways to repackage it at a 400% markup. These 12 foods survived the worst economic decades in modern history. They're cheap, they're proven, and most of them use ingredients you already have or can get for almost nothing. Let's get into it. Number 1. Pemmican. This is the one that starts arguments in survival forums, and for good reason. Pemmican packs roughly 3,500 calories per pound. That's not a typo. A single pound of this stuff, stored properly, contains enough energy to sustain an adult for almost 2 full days. It was developed by indigenous peoples of North America, primarily the Cree and Métis, centuries before European contact. The process is straightforward. Lean meat, usually bison or deer, dried and pounded into a powder, then mixed with rendered animal fat and sometimes dried berries, like saskatoons or choke cherries. Here's how important pemmican was. In 1814, the governor of the Red River Colony issued what's now called the Pemmican Proclamation, banning the export of pemmican from the region. That single decree sparked the Pemmican War, an actual armed conflict between the Hudson's Bay Company and the Northwest Company that lasted 4 years and culminated in the Battle of Seven Oaks in 1816. People went to war over this food. The entire Canadian fur trade ran on it. Arctic explorer Robert Peary ate it twice a day for over a year and wrote that the last bite tasted as good as the first. The shelf life, stored in a cool, dry place, is measured in years. Some historical accounts claim decades. And now, in a twist that would make those Métis hunters shake their heads, pemmican bars sell online for $8 to $12 a piece. As artisan health food, you can make a pound of it at home for about $4 worth of beef and tallow. Did you know it's essentially the original energy bar? Every protein bar in every gas station in America is a worse version of something indigenous peoples perfected centuries ago. Number 2, dandelion greens. Americans spend an estimated $80 million a year on herbicides to kill dandelions, and the thing they're poisoning is one of the most nutrient-dense greens you can eat. 1 cup of raw dandelion greens delivers about 103 milligrams of calcium, 7 milligrams of iron, 218 milligrams of potassium, and 279 micrograms of vitamin A. That's more vitamin A than a cup of kale. It's growing for free in nearly every yard in the country, and we're spending billions to eradicate it. During the Depression, families foraged dandelion greens out of necessity. Clara Canucciari, who became a YouTube sensation at 93 years old for sharing her Depression-era recipes, demonstrated a dandelion salad she'd been making since the 1930s, greens wilted in bacon fat, topped with a hard-boiled egg and a splash of vinegar. She lived to be 98 years old. The greens can be sautéed, added to soups, tossed fresh into salads, or steeped into tea. The bitter flavor mellows significantly when cooked, especially in a little fat. One honest note, you have to know where your dandelions are coming from. Never forage from a lawn that's been treated with pesticides or herbicides, and avoid roadsides where runoff collects. If you've got a clean patch of yard, though, you're sitting on free food that most of your neighbors are paying good money to destroy. Number 3. Bone broth. This is the one that went from poverty food to luxury product in a single generation. Your great grandmother made it from scraps: chicken carcasses, beef knuckles, pork neck bones, vegetable trimmings, a splash of vinegar to draw out the minerals. She simmered it for hours, sometimes all day, and it became the base for soups, stews, gravies, and rice. The cost was essentially zero because she was using parts of the animal that would otherwise be thrown away. The global bone broth market hit an estimated $1, $2 billion in 2025. In the United States alone, the market sits around $620 to $720 million and is projected to reach over $2 billion by 2032. You can walk into certain cafes in New York and Los Angeles and pay $9 for a single cup. That same cup, made at home from bones, your butcher will often give you for free or sell for under $3 a pound, costs roughly 40 to 50 cents. What makes bone broth nutritionally interesting is the collagen. When bones and connective tissues simmer for 12 to 24 hours, the collagen breaks down into gelatin and amino acids, primarily glycine, proline, and glutamine. These aren't exotic nutrients. They're the building blocks of skin, gut lining, and joint cartilage. Every traditional food culture on Earth, from Chinese medicine to French haute cuisine to West African soups, independently arrived at the same technique. That convergence doesn't happen by accident. It happens because it works. Number 4, hardtack. 3 ingredients: flour, water, and salt, mixed into a stiff dough, rolled flat, baked until completely dry, and stored. That's the whole recipe. Hardtack was the primary field ration of the Civil War, carried by Union and Confederate soldiers alike. It was standard issue in the War of 1812, both world wars, and every major military campaign in between. Here's the part that keeps sitting with me. There are specimens of hardtack from 1863 baked during the Civil War that still exist in museum collections and are reportedly still edible over 160 years later. Properly stored, meaning sealed and kept dry, hardtack has a shelf life that's measured in decades. Some survivalist communities cite 25 to 50 years as a conservative estimate. A 10-pound bag of flour produces roughly 100 pieces. Total cost is under $5. It's not glamorous food. Soldiers nicknamed it sheet iron and worm castles for a reason. But here's what it is: the most shelf-stable, calorie-dense, dirt-cheap emergency food you can make in your own kitchen in about an hour. And you don't need a freeze dryer, a vacuum sealer, or a $300 emergency food bucket from an online prepper store. You need flour, water, salt, and an oven. Number 5, cornbread. Native Americans were making cornbread centuries before European settlers arrived. The Algonquin, Cherokee, and other nations ground corn into meal and baked or fried it into bread using methods that varied by region but shared the same core principle: take the most abundant grain on the continent and make it into something portable, filling, and cheap. During the Civil War, cornbread kept both armies fed. During the Depression, it was a lifeline across the rural South and Appalachia, where cornmeal was far cheaper and more available than wheat flour. A 5-pound bag of cornmeal costs about $3 today, mixed with water, a pinch of salt, and cooked in a cast iron skillet with a little fat. It produces a dense, satisfying bread that pairs with almost anything. There's something about the smell of cornbread in a cast iron pan that I can't quite explain in words. It's that toasted, slightly sweet, almost nutty warmth that fills a kitchen in a way no other bread does. The edges get crisp where the batter meets the hot fat. The center stays tender. It's the kind of food that makes a pot of beans feel like a complete meal, because it is one, and it costs almost nothing. Number 6, Victory Garden preserves and home canning. In 1942, roughly 15 million American families planted what the government called victory gardens. By 1944, that number had grown to 20 million, and those gardens were producing an estimated 8 million tons of food. Roughly 40% of all fresh fruits and vegetables consumed in the United States that year. 40%. From backyard plots and community gardens, not industrial farms. Those families didn't just eat what they grew, they canned it. They pickled it. They preserved it in glass jars that lined basement shelves and root cellars from coast to coast. Home canning wasn't a hobby, it was infrastructure. Napoleon had actually kickstarted the whole concept back in 1809 when the French military offered a 12,000 franc prize to anyone who could develop a reliable method of preserving food for troops. A confectioner named Nicholas Appert won the prize using sealed glass jars and heat, and the foundation of modern canning was born. The pandemic brought this full circle. In 2020, Google searches for canning hit an all-time peak in the United States. Canning supply sales spiked so sharply that manufacturers couldn't keep lids and jars in stock. The mason jar and canning supply market is now valued at nearly $30 billion globally. And interest hasn't dropped. It's continued growing as grocery prices climb and more people rediscover that a jar of home canned tomatoes from August still tastes better than anything on a store shelf in February. If you're enjoying this and the kind of content I make, please support me by subscribing. It costs you nothing and it means the world to me. Now, let's keep going because the back half of this list gets even more interesting. Number 7, wacky cake, no eggs, no butter, no milk, no mixing bowl, even if you don't feel like it. The original Depression-era wacky cake, also called crazy cake or war cake, is mixed directly in the baking pan. Flour, sugar, cocoa powder, baking soda, salt, vegetable oil, vinegar, vanilla, and water. That's the entire ingredient list. The chemistry is elegant. In a standard cake, eggs serve as a binding and leavening agent. They hold the batter together and help it rise. Remove the eggs, and you need another source of carbon dioxide gas. The vinegar reacts with the baking soda to produce exactly that. It's the same reaction you used in your baking soda volcano in third grade science class, except this time the result is a moist, tender chocolate cake. Oil replaces butter for fat content, and because oil doesn't need to be softened or creamed, it simplifies the process even further. Here's what most people don't know. This recipe is accidentally one of the most allergy-friendly cakes you can bake. No dairy, no eggs. It's been vegan-friendly since the 1930s, decades before that word meant anything to the food industry. And it tastes legitimately good. Not good for what it is, but genuinely good. Rich, moist, and deeply chocolatey. The total ingredient cost comes in under $2 for a full cake. Number 8, potato pancakes from leftovers. The zero-waste principle of depression cooking shows up most clearly in potato pancakes. The concept is almost absurdly simple. Take last night's leftover mashed potatoes, mix in a little flour or breadcrumbs, maybe an egg if you have one, form them into patties, and fry them in a hot skillet until the outside is golden and crisp. This is a food with roots much older than the Depression. Eastern European Jews have made latkes for centuries. The Irish made boxty. German immigrants brought Kartoffelpuffer. Every culture that had access to potatoes and a frying pan arrived at some version of this dish independently. During the 1930s, American families stripped the concept down to its most economical form. Whatever starch was left over, whatever fat was available, and a hot pan. Nothing wasted. The beauty of it is that potato pancakes are a platform, not a fixed recipe. You can fold in onions, cheese, herbs, leftover vegetables, bits of ham. You can top them with sour cream, applesauce, or nothing at all. A batch made from last night's dinner sides costs you effectively $0 and produces something crispy, warm, and deeply satisfying. Number 9, mock apple pie. In the 1930s, when apples were too expensive or simply unavailable, home cooks discovered that crushed Ritz crackers soaked in a syrup of sugar, water, lemon juice, and cream of tartar could produce something that tasted remarkably like baked apples. Not vaguely similar, remarkably close. The reason is chemistry. Cream of tartar, which is tartaric acid, produces a fruity, tart flavor profile that closely mimics the malic acid found naturally in apples. Your tongue is essentially being fooled by one acid standing in for another. Nabisco caught on and started printing the mock apple pie recipe on the back of Ritz cracker boxes in the 1930s. They kept it there for over 50 years, through the end of the early 90s. The recipe went viral again on TikTok around 2021 and 2022, with millions of viewers stunned that something so deceptive could come from a sleeve of crackers and a few pantry staples. I want to be real with you. It doesn't taste exactly like apple pie. It tastes like a close cousin of apple pie that showed up to Thanksgiving and almost fooled everybody. The texture is softer, a little more uniform, but the fact that it exists at all, that it works at all, is a testament to how creative people get when they have almost nothing to work with. Number 10. Meatloaf stretched with oats and bread. The first known mention of meatloaf in the United States dates to 1899, but it was the Depression that turned it into a national staple, because meatloaf solved a very specific problem. Meat was expensive, and families needed it to go further. The solution was extenders: breadcrumbs, rolled oats, crushed crackers, even breakfast cereal, mixed into the ground meat to increase volume without dramatically changing the taste or texture. A pound of ground beef during the Depression went a lot further when you mixed it 50/50ths with breadcrumbs, an egg, and some diced onion. You could feed a family of 5 or 6 from a single pound of meat. The technique works just as well today. Ground chuck at $5 a pound, combined with a cup of oats and seasonings, produces roughly 2 pounds of finished meatloaf for under $7. That's 3 or 4 meals. Here's what most people get wrong about meatloaf. They think the fillers are a compromise. They're not. The breadcrumbs and oats absorb the meat's juices and fat during cooking, which is what keeps the loaf moist and tender instead of dense and dry. Remove the fillers, and you get a hockey puck. The Depression-era technique isn't a shortcut. It's genuinely the better way to make it. Number 11. Lard. For thousands of years, across dozens of cultures, animal fat was the primary cooking medium. Lard, rendered pig fat, was the standard in American kitchens from the colonial era through the early 20th century. Your great-grandmother's biscuits were flaky because of lard. Her pie crusts were tender because of lard. Her fried chicken was crisp and clean because lard has a high smoke point and a neutral flavor when properly rendered. Then, in 1911, Procter & Gamble introduced Crisco, a solid shortening made from hydrogenated cottonseed oil. The marketing campaign was one of the most effective in food history. P&G positioned Crisco as cleaner, more modern, more digestible, and more economical than lard. They gave away free cookbooks. They ran newspaper ads disguised as editorial content. Within a generation, lard went from being the default fat in every kitchen in America to something people associated with backwardness and poor health. The science tells a different story. Lard is roughly 45% monounsaturated fat, the same type of fat that makes olive oil a health darling. It contains 0 trans fats in its natural form. Crisco, on the other hand, was loaded with trans fats from the hydrogenation process for decades before the company reformulated. The fat that was marketed as healthier was, by most modern nutritional standards, measurably worse. Lard is now making a quiet comeback among chefs, bakers, and home cooks who've done the homework. A pound of quality lard from a butcher runs about $3 to $5. A century of marketing convinced us to abandon it. The chemistry never supported that decision. Number 12. Red beans and rice. In New Orleans, Monday has been Red Beans and Rice Day for over a century. The tradition traces back to a time before washing machines, when Monday was laundry day. Women spent the entire day scrubbing clothes by hand in large tubs, which meant they needed a meal that could simmer unattended for hours. A pot of red kidney beans, seasoned with onion, celery, garlic, a ham bone, or a few links of andouille sausage, set over low heat in the morning, would be soft, creamy, and ready to serve over rice by dinner. The dish practically cooked itself. But the nutritional logic runs deeper than convenience. Rice and beans together form a complete protein, meaning the amino acids that one lacks, the other provides. Beans are rich in lysine but low in methionine. Rice is the opposite. Combined, they deliver a protein profile comparable to meat at a fraction of the cost. A pound of dried red beans costs about $1.50. A pound of rice costs about $1. That's enough to feed 4 to 6 people a filling protein-complete meal for under $3 total. The Haitian Revolution played a role in bringing this particular combination to New Orleans, as refugees carried their food traditions into the city's culture. It also has roots in West African and Caribbean cooking that go back centuries. Louis Armstrong used to sign his letters, "Red beans and ricely yours." That's how embedded this dish is in the identity of a city that takes food more seriously than almost anywhere else on the continent. Now, before we wrap up, one honest note on all of this. Not everything from the Depression era was nutritionally ideal. Some of these recipes are calorie-dense and low in variety. The point isn't to romanticize poverty or pretend that people who lived through the 1930s and 1940s had it figured out better than we do. They were making the best of terrible circumstances. The point is that the principles behind this food, Waste nothing, stretch everything, use what's available, and learn the science of why simple ingredients work. Those principles are as sound now as they were then, somewhere in the last 70 or 80 years. As supermarket aisles filled up with branded convenience products and the processed food industry grew into a $2 trillion global machine, a lot of this knowledge just quietly stopped being passed down.
It didn't get suppressed or hidden. It just got replaced by something louder and more expensive.
I don't know what brought you here. Maybe grocery prices have been eating into your budget and you're looking for ways to push back.
Maybe you found a handwritten recipe card in a grandmother's kitchen drawer and you're trying to figure out what she knew. Maybe you just have a gut feeling that the older way of doing things had something we lost. Maybe it's midnight and an algorithm dropped you here for reasons neither of us can fully explain. Doesn't matter. These 12 foods fed families through the worst decades in modern history. They're cheap, they're tested, and they still work. That's it for today. I hope you learned something you didn't expect to, and I'll see you in the next one.